Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Swallowed Star based on novel. So let's start. The Mingdo mountain range was still deathly quiet, and there were all sorts of aerial surveillance soul tools flying rhythmically in the background. Hu Yuhao could feel both intense excitement and anxiety, and his senses were elevated continuously in this moment. He could even feel that his potential was being unleashed continuously under such circumstances. It'd be fantastic if I could continue in such a state. Hu Yuhao understood that his cultivation would probably improve once more after he succeeded in this mission. 2,000 meters, 1,800 meters, 1,500 meters, 1,300 meters, 1,200 meters. Hu Yuhao paused when he was 1,200 meters away from the main peak. He wasn't hasty to push forward, and neither did he release any spiritual detection. Instead, he relied only on his eyes to look up at the peak. His spirit eyes were at the highest possible level of the purple demon eyes, even without support from his spiritual power. He could see many things clearly in the darkness, even from 1,200 meters away. Hu Yuhao discovered that there were not that many soul tools installed on the Mingdo mountain range's main peak. Instead, there were relatively more soul tools installed on the two peaks beside it. A large region of the main peak's tip was covered by metal, and there were many strange-looking metal shells constructed on it. These metal shells were undoubtedly the best cover for the soul tools within. Hu Yuhao memorized every single one of their positions in his heart. Even if his mission failed in the end, memorizing these positions accurately would still be very useful. At the same time, he relied on his own observations to judge where the Death God was located. He was scouting out the Death God, and it would be best if he could damage or destroy it, as that was the most important aim of his expedition. The Death God wasn't difficult to find. Hu Yuhao quickly saw the hemispherical metal dome on the main peak's tip. This metal dome was about 10 meters in diameter, and it was completely metal gray in color. It wasn't eye-catching or obvious at all whether it was day or night, but Hu Yuhao could feel his soul shaking when he saw it. Hu Yuhao's senses were still very perceptive even though the metal dome wasn't releasing any soul power undulations. What is this? It's clearly a terrifying pressure naturally produced by something terrifying. It should be there. I will have completed half of my task if I can get close to it. The Death God was powerful, but it was positioned strategically, and it wouldn't achieve its desired effect if one actually got close to it. The Death God was better at attacking from long range no matter how powerful it was, and it wasn't all powerful. Hu Yuhao took a deep breath and began to move once more. He held his breath, and edged forward bit by bit. Rose gold colors flickered in his eye of destiny as he stared at what was in front of him. The spiritual barrier didn't have any shape or form, and even Hu Yuhao couldn't detect the spiritual barrier using his spiritual power without touching it. However, he would immediately be discovered if he touched it. 1,200 meters, 1,100 meters, 1,050 meters. He pushed on bit by bit, until he was almost there. Hu Yuhao paused when he was about 1,020 meters away from the main peak. Hu Yuhao had relied entirely on his memory from his previous expedition to reach this point, but he was unable to be sure about the last few dozen meters. He was taking a risk, so he decided to keep his risk within a controllable range. Hu Yuhao quietly removed the leather wings on his body, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He had originally thought that he would need a lot more effort to close the gap, as there were likely to be oscillation detectors on the mountaintop, after all. However, the Sun-Moon Empire was evidently very confident after transforming the surveillance soul tools on the outer layer. The mountain's oscillation detectors were all placed on the outside, and there were no other surveillance soul tools on the inside except for the spiritual barrier. His eye of destiny became increasingly bright as Hu Yuhao's spiritual power flourished more and more. The light around Hu Yuhao began to contort faintly as large amounts of spiritual power were unleashed. Spiritual blast? A low growl came out of Hu Yuhao's mouth. The air in front of him began to sizzle as if it were boiling, and soundless booms abruptly exploded within 10 meters around him. This was a spiritual type attack with an area of effect. The spiritual barrier that was hidden 1,000 meters from the main peak was finally triggered. It released a dull hum as it appeared roughly 10 meters away from Hui Yuhao. The spiritual barrier rippled intensely under the effects of his spiritual blast. BRNG. BRNG. Shrill alarm sounds immediately rang out on the mountaintop. Hui Yuhao's expression didn't change. At this point in time, there was no longer any meaning in using imitation to conceal his position. Gold and purple light flashed in his eye of destiny on his forehead, and a purplish gold beam of light blasted out from it as the sky was gradually tinted rose gold, while blinding light collided ferociously with the spiritual barrier. One had to know that the manic bull Doluo Wang Yihang took a big hit back then from Hui Yuhao's attack, and his defensive spiritual type soul tool was directly shattered. Even though the spiritual barrier around the Mingdo mountain range's main peak was powerful, the main problem with it was that it covered an area that was far too large. Therefore, any localized position's defensive strength couldn't reach the standard of a Class 9 soul tool. Whoosh, a hole that was 1 meter in diameter appeared on the spiritual barrier as it popped open like a pierced balloon. However, this spiritual barrier was impressive. It swiftly stretched out to cover the gaps after it had been broken through. Hui Yuhao couldn't possibly let such an opportunity go, and light spurted from his flying-type soul tool as he transformed into a beam of light and darted through the hole he had created. He didn't touch the spiritual barrier at all. Hui Yuhao's life could end in an instant as he came within 1,000 meters of the main peak. How could he allow himself to be dazed after touching the spiritual barrier? Light glowed on the main peak, and even the stones began to shift in some places. Metal shells split open on the mountaintop, revealing the soul tools inside. Hui Yuhao didn't have to use spiritual detection to feel that large amounts of soul tools were locked onto him. Beams of light instantly began to twist around Hui Yuhao's body. Spiritual interference. The 3 pairs of wings on his back roared at maximum capacity at the same time, and he channeled as much soul power as he could. In addition to the 2 rows of soul thrusters firing off, everything propelled him like a shooting star as he went directly for the main peak. He was going right for the death god. Hui Yuhao stretched out his spiritual detection to every corner once he was inside the spiritual barrier. His main target was still the mountaintop. He wanted to see what the death god was exactly. A conical soul tool gradually protruded from within the hemispherical shell. This soul tool was dark red, and the light from all the soul tools around it seemed to dim in the moment that it appeared. Frightening soul power undulations rippled out from it, and once Hui Yuhao's spiritual power touched it, an intense and piercing pain appeared deep in his spirit. Hui Yuhao howled in agony, and was almost unable to control himself as he nearly fell. He retracted his spiritual detection as if he had just touched red-hot metal. This was the first time that Hui Yuhao had experienced something like this. He didn't cut such a sorry figure even when he was facing the beast god. That is. Hui Yuhao effortfully channeled his soul and spiritual power as his expression changed to one of terror, and at the same time, he tried his best to keep his balance. Light from the soul tools on the mountaintop erupted at the same time. Large masses of soul rays and cannon shells blanketed toward Hui Yuhao. They didn't care about his spiritual interference domain, they just launched attacks over an enormous area. Hui Yuhao retracted his spiritual detection very quickly. Even though that intense pain was still splitting his head open, he couldn't care about that at this moment. He kept his spiritual detection within a certain range around his body as he flickered continuously. He didn't charge forward toward the main peak anymore. Instead, he swiftly plummeted downward. Evading all those fatal attacks first was the wisest move. The Skydream Iceworm's spiritual origin began to take effect in Hui Yuhao's mind as gentle spiritual power nourished his spiritual seed to lessen his suffering. However, Hui Yuhao was severely affected by that moment he came into contact with that thing. His body still slowed a little, and he still didn't evade one of the soul rays. That soul ray struck the side of his arm, and the hit made him spin in midair like a top. It was a Class 7 soul ray. Fortunately, he had his solo battle armor protecting him. Otherwise, no matter how powerful he was, he would have been injured from that hit. The situation was worse than he had thought, and the most important factor to everything was that the death god's strength exceeded Hui Yuhao's expectations. In this moment, the dark red pointy tower was completely erect as faint dark red light rotated around it. However, it didn't fire at him. It was clear that, for the person who was controlling the Death God, Hui Yuhao was not worthy of firing the Death God. Just as Hui Yuhao was placed at a complete disadvantage and was about to use instant teleportation to defuse the situation, a purple beam of light suddenly glowed from behind his back as a series of crackling sounds appeared in the sky. A patch of soul cannon shells that were sweeping over were detonated as they exploded in a patch in the sky. A gentle strength pulled on Hui Yuhao and dragged him horizontally, out of the explosion's epicenter. A slender figure appeared from thin air behind him, and Hui Yuhao was stunned speechless when he looked up. The person who had suddenly appeared to save him was, to his immense surprise, Tang Wutong. She was very glamorous in this moment as her radiant dragon butterfly's wings stretched out behind her. There was no doubt that she was the one who had released that purple light. "How can you be here?" Hui Yuhao couldn't help but ask. Not in his wildest dreams did he expect that Tang Wutong would follow him here. However, he didn't sense anything at all before this. This was just unbelievable. Tang Wutong giggled and said, "That's nothing. I have an innate skill, and I followed you inside, that's all. You would have been target practice if it hadn't been for me. What do we do next?" Hui Yuhao couldn't be bothered with asking Tang Wutong what innate skill that was. At the same time, her timely intervention and delay gave the Sky Dream Ice Worm enough time to alleviate the stabbing pain in his spiritual sea. Hui Yuhao dragged Tang Wutong and swiftly pulled her towards the mountain's peak. It seems impossible to chase her away at this point. I can only continue on to complete the task, and try my best to survive amongst all the dangers. Your guts are too big. Hui Yuhao growled angrily as he accelerated towards the mountain's peak at his fastest possible speed. No wonder she was keeping quiet the entire time, and didn't make a sound when everyone else was requesting to participate in this expedition. She had already made her plans. Hui Yuhao was very calm before, but now he was starting to feel a little frantic. Their enemies didn't care what state of mind they were in. Soul rays crisscrossed like a web of death as they continued sweeping toward the two of them. These were all soul rays that were class 7 or above, and they were likely to be locked on if they were struck even once. Hui Yuhao unleashed his spiritual interference domain and spiritual detection to their highest possible levels. He dragged Tang Wutong as they dodged and waltzed through the air, and they continued flying closer to the mountain peak. They had to get onto the mountain. Hui Yuhao was 1,000 meters away when he began his charge, and now only 500 meters remained. His plan would have a chance of success as long as he charged through the last 500 meters. 400 meters. Just as Hui Yuhao was relying on his tremendous speed and judgment ability to continue pushing forward, a spherical soul tool on the mountaintop suddenly released a layer of orange-red light. This layer of light expanded outward, and quickly became a film of light. Hui Yuhao could evade soul rays and cannon shells, but such area attacks that locked down every angle were futile as well. Chilly lights flickered in his eyes as he swung his right hand unparalleled chill, Emperor's Sword. Dark blue sword light burst into the world as it slashed ferociously onto the film, and what exceeded everyone's expectations was the fact that it was actually slashed open. However, it still collided with Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong's bodies, but it didn't explode. This is... Hui Yuhao's eyes closed into slits. This is evidently a light of resistance. Yes, it's a light of resistance. This thing doesn't have any offensive power in itself, but it's very tenacious and uses propulsion to push its enemies further away. This was a soul tool that soul engineers typically used in battles against soul masters. Except this was the first time that he had seen a light of resistance with such a large area of effect. Who's this maniac who made a light of resistance into a class 7 soul tool? His frustrations couldn't solve his problems. The two of them were directly pushed from 400 meters back to 600 meters after they were struck by the light of resistance. Hui Yuhao would have been pushed even further if he hadn't used his full strength to stabilize himself. Tang Wutong wasn't idle as she flapped her wings continuously while she pushed out beam after beam of dragon-shaped airflows and dispelled every attack that was most likely to threaten them. At this moment, the Sun-Moon Empire seemed to have readjusted themselves. Shadow after shadow emerged from the mountaintop not far away, and they were all flying towards the two of them. The surveillance soul tools that were originally behind them turned around and began to unleash wave after wave in their direction. Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection domain was about to be affected by those oscillation detectors. Even though his powerful spiritual power could also in turn affect those oscillation detectors, Hui Yuhao's reach and range was much smaller. Hui Yuhao regained his calm as he was faced with such a situation. He turned towards Tang Wutong and growled, "I'm going to send you onto the mountain. Afterwards, you will unleash destruction up there as much as you can, don't care about me. Do you understand?" Yes, Tang Wutong didn't waste any words as she immediately agreed. Hui Yuhao pulled Tang Wutong to him and wrapped his hands around her. Tang Wutong's slender waist was very bouncy, but it was a pity that Hui Yuhao couldn't feel anything because he was clad in his solo battle armor. Tang Wutong blushed. She didn't know what Hui Yuhao was trying to do right now, but this was the second time that she had found herself in his arms. She wasn't angry like she was the last time, and realized to her surprise that she wasn't even too embarrassed. "Take care of yourself, and find one person for me." Hui Yuhao hollered as blue light erupted from his solo battle armor in the next moment. The blue lights flashed as they enveloped Tang Wutong, and her elegant frame was propelled from his body like a cannon shell in the next moment. An ability that came with the solo battle armor, transport. This ability allowed Hui Yuhao to transform his soul power to envelope any physical body before propelling it out. The force of this propulsion was extremely large, but it wouldn't harm the transported body at all. The reason why this soul skill was installed on his solo battle armor was so that he could help his teammates reach their designated positions during group battles. This ability was unique to Xianzuan, and the Sun Moon Empire didn't have any soul engineers who could craft soul transporters. After Tang Wutong's body was propelled toward the mountain, the soul power that was pushing her forward naturally transformed into a protective layer. She was moving almost as fast as a cannon shell. The Sun Moon Empire evidently didn't expect Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong to have such a burst of speed after being pushed back by their light of resistance. This explosion of speed was comparable to that of a titled Dolor. However, Hui Yuhao became target practice after Tang Wutong was gone. Tremendous masses of cannon shells and soul rays swept in his direction. The oscillation detectors behind Hui Yuhao had completed their sweep on him at the same time. Even though they couldn't lock onto him precisely, they could reduce the size of his rough location to 10% of the area they were targeting before. Therefore, Hui Yuhao was entirely trapped in a barrage of attacks. Hui Yuhao vanished into thin air with a flash of light, and reappeared 50 meters away. Instant teleportation. This soul skill couldn't be used repeatedly, but Hui Yuhao finally used it at that crucial moment. Tang Wutong had already closed in on the main peak. The attacking soul tools were targeted at Hui Yuhao before this, and thus there actually weren't any attacks that locked onto her position at this moment. Most of the defensive soul tools on the main peak would lose their effectiveness once she arrived on the main peak. Hui Yuhao could feel that some soul tools that were class 8 or above were done charging, and he would have to face a truly unstoppable fusillade in the next moment. Quick, Wutong! He needed Tang Wutong to find an enemy for him, with which he would use the Xuanwu displacement that he had duplicated from Shusancha to switch himself over. Hui Yuhao's eyes suddenly closed into slits at this moment, and his eyes were overcome with fear. The reason was because a beam of dark red was soundlessly fired from that dark red pointy tower that was fully erected, and it was going straight for Tang Wutong. The death god is attacking Wutong. Hui Yuhao could feel goosebumps break out over his body. Even though he knew Tang Wutong wasn't Wang Donga, they looked identical after all. Furthermore, he was still holding onto a thread of hope in his heart that they were one and the same. Hui Yuhao had seen how powerful the death god was when it unleashed its power. Back then, a blinding patch of white had appeared, but the light beam was red this time, and it didn't seem like it could cover as large an area as the white light from before could reach. However, how could he let Tang Wutong be struck by an attack such as this? He almost didn't hesitate as he unleashed the soul skill that he had duplicated, Xuanwu displacement. Lights flashed, and Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong switched places. Tang Wutong also realized what was happening when the dark red beam blasted out. A stifling sensation coursed throughout her body, and she lowered her head subconsciously to look, but the red beam was already in front of her. Tang Wutong felt as if all the blood in her body was frozen in that moment, and agonizing howls rang out in her ears, as if she had descended into purgatory. However, the pressure around her suddenly vanished entirely in the next moment, and even everything that was in front of her eyes had changed. Hui Yuhao was looking toward her before this. Therefore, the first thing Tang Wutong saw after he used Xuanwu displacement was a red beam swallowing his entire body. No! A shrill scream broke the air. Tang Wutong felt as if that dark red beam didn't fall onto Hui Yuhao. Instead, she felt as if it had pierced her heart. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe at that moment, and she flapped her wings hysterically as he raced toward Hui Yuhao. However, the cannon fire that was concentrated on Hui Yuhao before this closed in on her. She didn't have spiritual interference domain, so she was directly locked onto. A sharp cry could be heard as Tang Wutong's seventh soul ring glowed radiant dragon butterfly true body. She transformed into a purple beam of light, and she became completely illusory to all the soul tools that had locked onto her. An intense and indescribable golden beam erupted from her body in the next moment. A golden trident shone brilliantly on her forehead, and golden light flashed once before she forcefully broke out from all the cannon fire as she bolted directly toward the mountaintop. Everything was barren and deathly silent. Xu Sanxia, Jiang Nannan, Ji Juichen, Jing Ziyan, Yi Gai, and Nan Qiuqiu were all waiting here quietly. They had already been here long before Hui Yuhao had set off. There were 13 soul masters of varying ages with them, but every single one of them were powerful titled Dolor. There were even 2 transcendent Dolor amongst them. Hui Yuhao definitely couldn't destroy the Mingdo mountain range's main peak all by himself. The attacking plan that he and the White Tiger Duke had devised was simple. He would bring every single one of them onto the main peak. There were some things that Hui Yuhao couldn't do, but if more than 10 titled Dolor combined their strength to do those things, then the result would be very different. Once they were within range of the main peak, and once titled Dolor unleashed their full fighting strength, their combined power wasn't something those close-range soul tools' defensive perimeter could resist. They would achieve victory amidst the dangers. However, this plan had a prerequisite, and that was that Hui Yuhao had to be able to rush onto the main peak and buy enough time to release the others. There was no doubt that Xu Sanxia and the others were no longer on the Dolor continent. They were in Hui Yuhao's spectral demiplane. Nobody could feel any undead inside the spectral demiplane, as Hui Yuhao had scattered the undead creatures far away beforehand. Hui Yuhao had used his spectral demiplane before when he was rescuing the White Tiger Duke, and this time, even though the White Tiger Duke would suspect him, Hui Yuhao couldn't be bothered with that, as they needed to break through the Mingdo mountain range's defenses. The White Tiger Duke would have suspected him a long time ago if not for the fact that he was still young. That was the reason why his thoughts were a little different when he was escorting Hui Yuhao into the air. From the White Tiger Duke's perspective, Hui Yuhao was likely to be a disciple of the person who had saved him. Perhaps the person who had saved him came from Shrek Academy. Waiting was a kind of torture. Xu Sanxia and the others had already been waiting for a long time. There was a dark door not far from them. Hui Yuhao had told them that if they didn't hear his call within 2 hours, then they had to charge out from this door. Almost an hour had passed, but they still hadn't received any news at all. Sanxia, do you think Yuhao is in trouble? Why do I feel like something is not right with this place of his? Jiang Nannan whispered to Xu Sanxia, who was beside her. Xu Sanxia was momentarily stunned. What's wrong? Since Yuhao has allowed us to participate in this operation, there shouldn't be a problem. Look, we have more than 10 titled Dolor with us, and we have to rely on their strength to complete our mission. Yuhao can't have lied to us. Jiang Nannan forced a laugh and said, the reason I think something is wrong is because of these titled Dolor. Think about it, what will happen if this operation fails? Won't everyone be completely stuck in this place without his call? That can't be the case, because he's left this dark door for us. But where does this door lead? If his mission has failed, he can't possibly let these titled Dolor rush out into our enemy's cannon fire. I'm afraid that this door leads us directly back into our camp. Xu Sanxia was rendered speechless for a while as he listened to Jiang Nannan's words. His facial expression gradually turned black after a few moments as he snapped around at Jiang Nannan and growled, why didn't you say this earlier? Jiang Nannan looked very aggrieved. It only just came to me. It seems like Yuhao isn't confident at all. We have all been tricked. No wonder I felt as if something wasn't right when he agreed so readily. What should we do now? Shu Sancha rubbed his fists and said, we have to wait, that's the only thing we can do. If this door leads back to our camp, then walking out now will mean we no longer have an opportunity to help him. We can only pray that his mission is a success. That little rascal is putting himself in danger once again. Inside the commander's tent of the Star Luo Empire's Northwestern Field Army, there were several dozen Soul Masters standing quietly inside the commander's tent. The White Tiger Duke was sitting in the main commander's seat, and Princess Jojo was sitting beside him. They were all waiting quietly for news to arrive. There was a dark door conjured not far from the White Tiger Duke. Hui Hao had left this behind before he left. He told the White Tiger Duke that even if his mission wasn't successful, he wouldn't incur any losses for the army at all, and going through with their conservative plan was enough. The White Tiger Duke was clear that Hui Hao no longer cared about his safety when he said those words, and when those titled Dolua walked out from this door, it would mean that Hui Hao had paid with his life in this operation. The Soul Master Legions would complete the rest of their offensive, and all 8 Soul Master Legions were ready. All they were waiting for was the signal from the front lines. Shu Jiujio tried her best to remain calm, and she sat beside the White Tiger Duke in silence. However, everyone could feel the stifling pressure in the atmosphere. The White Tiger Duke and Princess Jojo undoubtedly felt the greatest pressure, because they were the only ones who knew about the news that came from the Heavenly Soul Empire. If their mission was unsuccessful, then the Star Luo Empire would be pushed into a completely passive position. All they could do was pray for Hui Hao. Dai Yuehang and Dai Lawli were both standing behind the White Tiger Duke. Dai Yuehang's eyebrows were slightly furrowed, as if he were thinking about something, while Dai Lawli's eyes were flickering faintly. The White Tiger Duke and Princess Jojo knew about the secret news that came from the Heavenly Soul Empire, and he knew yet another secret. He knew the secret of Hui Hao's identity. Hui Hao had gone to look for him this morning. How are things, Luoli? How has your cultivation been recently? Why are you here, brother? Are you here to give me some pointers? Dai Luoli stared at Hui Hao, who had lifted his tent's curtain and was walking in, and he couldn't help but greet him excitedly. Hui Hao shook his head with a faint smile on his face and said, "Eh? You want to be beaten up again?" Dai Luoli blushed and said, "Being beaten up isn't a bad thing, actually. My improvements were the fastest when you were beating me up. Brother, you have to promise me to get me one of those spirits. We can do that once this war is over. Even though I have been bottlenecked at rank 40 because I lack an extra soul ring, I can feel that I have been improving very quickly recently." Hui Hao chuckled and said, "That's good. Don't worry, spirits won't be a problem as long as you're willing to put in effort. Right, I came here to find you because there's something I have to tell you." "What?" Dai Luoli asked curiously. Hui Hao said plainly, "I am going on a mission tonight, and I may not return. I haven't decided yet. If I don't return, then you can tell him about my secrets." "Eh? What mission are you going to execute? Will it be dangerous? Who and what do you want me to tell?" Hui Hao walked in front of Dai Luoli and rubbed his head gently. "It's not dangerous. What I meant was that you can tell your father about my identity." Dai Luoli trembled. "You figured it out?" Hui Hao smiled and said, "If I don't return, it means I've figured it out. I just don't want to face him. But if you leave, then when will we meet again?" Dai Luoli said hurriedly. Hui Hao was momentarily stunned. "We'll meet again if fate allows it." Dai Luoli was thinking about every word that Hui Hao had said to him, and he could feel his heart slowly tensing up. Is the mission really not dangerous? If the mission isn't dangerous, then why would my father wait here with such a formidable force? Neither he nor Dai Yuehang knew what kind of order their father would give next, but Dai Luoli could guess that everything that was happening had something to do with Hui Hao. "You can't let anything happen to you, brother." Everything around him was dark red, and a strange force surged into Hui Hao's body from all directions. He felt, in that moment, as if there were countless avenging spirits that were about to tear his body apart, and were about to swallow his spirit. He couldn't feel anything else around him except for all the dark red colors. Yes, this was the death god's power. Even though this wasn't its complete version, this power seemed enough to deal with him. Hu Yuhao could almost feel that his body was being torn apart by this sinister and terrifying strength, and his life energy was swiftly seeping away as his spiritual seed gradually crumbled. Am I going to die? Countless images surfaced in Hu Yuhao's mind at this moment. His mother's gentle eyes, and her yearning gaze before her death. Dong's arrogant demeanor when she was dressed in men's clothes, and how tender she was afterwards. Father, yes, and my father. I don't know if my death will make him sad. He set his own son on a path of death with his own hands, and perhaps this is the best vengeance that he deserves. If he doesn't care. Hu Yuhao clenched his fists tightly, and the tiger's tooth pierced into his palm. However, he regretted nothing in this moment. Is everything going to end just like this? Mother, I'm coming to find you. Suddenly, an icy-cold aura rose up. Hu Yuhao had already lost all hope when he felt an incredibly strong power burst forth from his body and forcefully chase away all the avenging spirits that had invaded his body. That clean and cool feeling appeared first in his chest before it stretched over his torso, as wave of flourishing life energy took this opportunity to spurt from his body. That was the power of the Life Guardian blade. Scales that were as black as night swiftly covered his entire body. The dark red light had long disappeared, but Hu Yuhao hadn't been reduced to flying dust. Instead, he was plummeting down right at a mountain peak not far away. His solo battle armor had been melted away into nothingness, and all he had left at this moment was armor of black scales. Fortunately, he didn't bring out his starlight sapphire ring. This was actually the thought that had occurred to him despite his circumstances. The Great Star Do Forest's Lake of Life. The clear and transparent lake water suddenly turned black, and an indignant dragon roar could be heard in the next moment. An enormous dragon head that was several tens of meters in diameter emerged from the lake's surface. The dragon head was as black as ink, but its eyes were bright gold. Except, there were faint traces of blood amidst all that golden radiance. Roar, the dragon's maw opened as a dark red sphere erupted from within it. After this dark red sphere emerged, countless images of avenging spirits appeared in the sky as the sphere dissipated, and these avenging spirits howled in agony as the sphere vanished. The dragon's golden eyes became clear once more after it expelled this dark red air sphere. So powerful. So brutal. Is this a weapon humans created with avenging spirits? Bam! Hu Yuhao's body crashed into the side of the mountain. At this moment, he seemed like he was part of the mountain, because his entire body was covered in black dragon scales. He didn't hesitate at all as he activated spiritual interference domain once more. He turned to look in Tang Wutong's direction at the same time. Hu Yuhao instantly saw, to his surprise, that an intense layer of golden light had appeared around Tang Wutong, and was pushing her body forward toward the mountainside at lightning speed. She was as fast as a shooting star. More strangely, the layer of golden light that was protecting her repelled all the soul cannon shells and soul rays that were flying toward her, and those things didn't detonate at all. What kind of power is that? It's so powerful. A soul master that was erupting with speed at all full strength could cover several hundred meters in the blink of an eye. Tang Wutong charged into the mountainside as well. Hu Yuhao immediately connected to her through spiritual detection. They didn't pause at all, but turned around and bolted toward a blind spot where the death god couldn't attack them directly. All the soul tools on the main peak stopped firing at the moment they reached the mountain, and they could no longer threaten them in any way. However, several hundred soul engineers were already racing toward the main peak, and were coming closer and closer. You're still alive? Tang Wutong grabbed his shoulder excitedly as she saw Hu Yuhao. Even though the power of darkness emanating from the black dragon scales made her feel uncomfortable, she couldn't be bothered with all that at this moment. Hu Yuhao cursed, laughed, and said, "Why are you cursing me to die?" Tang Wutong panted furiously for a few moments. "Nobody's cursing you. How did you do that? That power. Let's talk about that later. Let's continue with our mission." Hu Yuhao grabbed her hand. The black scales on his body were starting to disappear, but he couldn't be bothered with putting on any clothes as he pulled Tang Wutong right toward the place on the main peak that was caved inward. He began to murmur some incantations at the same time. Dense spiritual undulations emerged from his body and circled around him. Tang Wutong felt entirely different when he held her hand this time. Hui Yuhao's hand was very warm, and was very strong. She felt very safe and secure, even though they were in such a dangerous place. The scene of what had just happened had been deeply imprinted into her mind, even though she didn't know how Hui Yuhao had managed to stay alive. The armor on his body was gone, and he seemed like nothing had happened to him, but she clearly felt that he had lost all life at that moment. He didn't hesitate to save me. The image of Hui Yuhao being enveloped in all the dark red light replayed over and over in her mind. The assault from the Sun Moon Empire's soul engineers arrived from a distance right at this moment, and everything came sweeping down. Oscillation detectors surrounded them from all positions at the same time. They were like turtles in a jar for the Sun Moon Empire. This soul master who had penetrated their defenses time and time again had given them too much trouble and dealt far too heavy losses to them. He had even baited Wang Yihang out and killed him. That was incredibly humiliating for the Sun Moon Empire, and they didn't believe that this soul master could escape from his current circumstances. Hui Yuhao stood still in a depression in the mountain and unleashed his life-reflecting shield. He protected both himself and Tang Wutong within it, and his incantations became increasingly rushed. This was her fifth soul skill, Dragon God's Howl. This soul skill wasn't as powerful as her sixth soul skill, Deadly Dragon God Dance, but this soul skill could be used continuously. Hui Yuhao finally completed his spell as a flashing door suddenly appeared beside him. Just as Hui Yuhao was preparing to summon his companions from inside the spectral demiplane, Tang Wutong suddenly called out, "Hey, wait." "What?" Hui Yuhao asked confusedly. Tang Wutong didn't look at him, and her eyes had been elsewhere this entire time. However, Hui Yuhao could see from her profile that her pretty face and neck were tainted with faint red hues. "Put on some clothes." Tang Wutong's voice was very soft, but it rang loud and clear in Hui Yuhao's ears. Hui Yuhao glanced downward, and realized that all the black scales protecting him had disappeared. Then, there wasn't much else. That was called clean. This time, besides his solo battle armor, Hui Yuhao had even left the breastplate, Hongchen's blessing, that he had obtained from the illustrious Virtue Hall Master, Jing Hongchen back in the army camp. He had instructed Dai Luoli to take it if Hui Yuhao didn't return. Therefore, one could say that he had absolutely nothing on him. "I didn't bring any," Hui Yuhao said weakly. Tang Wutong's face became even redder as she tossed a long dress back to Hui Yuhao. "Wrap this around you." "All right." Hui Yuhao couldn't be bothered with anything else, as they were in an emergency, and wrapped the dress around his waist to protect his most important parts before he summoned his companions. Silhouettes emerged swiftly from the door. Shu Sancha took point, Xuan Wu shield wall. Golden light erupted as a large patch of shields formed a defensive perimeter that protected Tang Wutong and Hui Yuhao within. Shu Sancha was momentarily stunned when he saw Tang Wutong, before he saw Hui Yuhao, who was still wrapped in a dress. "Geez, Yuhao. We were worried about you for nothing. Are you two here on a date, or executing a mission? How have you guys fooled around until you have no clothes left? Ha ha ha." Shu Sancha couldn't help tease Hui Yuhao as he saw the wretched shape he was in. However, his face quickly turned pale. The Sun Moon Empire's soul engineers had already surrounded them. Shu Sancha had deflected those formidable attacks twice with his golden Xuanwu shield, but his soul power was being sapped at an incredible speed. However, more shadows began to emerge from within the door at this moment. A tremendous shadow suddenly opened up. It was an enormous umbrella, and everything within several tens of square meters was protected within it. Every single soul ray and cannon shell that fell down were all blocked, and the pressure on Shu Sancha was lifted a little. The Big Dipper umbrella. The Big Dipper Doluo was here. Yes, the commander of the Star Luo Empire's first Soul Master Legion, the Big Dipper Doluo, was also participating in this operation. "Give me a set of clothes, third senior brother." Hui Yuhao could feel all the strange gazes that everyone was giving him, and sheepishly asked Shu Sancha for help. Shu Sancha chuckled. This wasn't a good time for him to continue teasing Hui Yu Hao, as he tossed a warrior robe to him and used his Xuanwu shield to cover him. Hui Yu Hao swiftly changed into his new clothes. At this moment, all the titled Doluo and the rest of the Tang sect emerged from the door. The Big Dipper Doluo continued fighting against the incoming assault as he asked Hui Yu Hao, "Is this the main peak?" "Yes," Hui Yu Hao said. "Be careful, everyone. The death god is on the mountaintop, that red cone-shaped object. If I'm not wrong, the death god must be connected to the Holy Ghost Church, as it contains the ability of evil soul masters. It seems to have been crafted by compressing avenging spirits and some special powers together. It's extremely frightening. Make sure you don't get hit. Avoid the angles that the death god can reach as much as you can as you carry out the mission." "Understood. I can finally have a good fight with these bastards," a tall and burly titled Doluo exclaimed furiously as he raised his right hand, in which a golden sphere immediately glowed. 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 5 black soul rings rose up as an enormous hammer appeared in this titled Doluo's hands. This large hammer was yellow, and it emanated a dense and heavy aura once it appeared. His title was his martial soul, the Giant Hammer Doluo. The Giant Hammer Doluo swung his arms as the large hammer in his hands crashed ferociously against the mountainside. What was surprising was that his hammer didn't cause any loud explosions as it crashed into the mountain. Instead, a yellow sphere quickly stretched out across the mountain. Hui Yu Hao could faintly feel that there was an incredibly formidable strength that was threading through the mountain. Of course, the Giant Hammer Doluo and the Big Dipper Doluo weren't the only ones who began to attack. The other titled Doluo went on the offensive like a bunch of tigers who had been released from their cages. Purple beams stretched across the skies like arrows. These purple beams flickered in the air before they disappeared, and there were no flight trajectories to them, but agonizing cries could be heard in the distance immediately afterwards. How could the Sun Moon Empire's soul engineers know that more than 10 titled Doluo would suddenly appear here? They were caught off guard, and the only things they could use to defend themselves were their automatic protective soul barriers. However, how could automatic soul barriers defend against the attacks of a titled Doluo who was adept with spatial power? Several dozen soul engineers were impaled by those purple lights, and their bodies broke apart as they disintegrated into a rain of blood that splattered in all directions. The Star Luo Empire's titled Doluo had been held back long enough. They had felt far too restrained over recent days and weeks. They dared to challenge anybody in the Sun Moon Empire based on their individual fighting strengths, but they could only wait bitterly every day because they were suppressed by the surveillance from the Sun Moon Empire's soul tools. They couldn't fight even though they wanted to. This was especially so during that instance when 2,000 high-tier soul masters perished, which had dealt a heavy blow to them. Their disciples and relatives were among those who died, and this meant there was now a bloody vendetta they had to exact against the Sun Moon Empire. How could they control themselves now that they were suddenly deep within enemy lines? They couldn't be bothered with the threat from the death god anymore. All they wanted to do was spill the blood of their enemies. An intense tremor suddenly rippled within the mountain. The entire mountain trembled as deafening booms crackled inside the mountain, while a large region caved in on the mountaintop. The Giant Hammer Doluo is so powerful. Hui Yu Hao's eyes glowed. These people are so powerful. Senior Giant Hammer, you can attack something a distance away through the air. The Giant Hammer Doluo nodded and said, "I'm going to crush them. But I can't see them, so my attacks are a little inaccurate. But I can see." Hui Yu Hao laughed. He shared his spiritual detection with the Giant Hammer Doluo, and immediately marked out the important positions on the mountaintop for him. They were still relatively far from the Death God's location, but they were close enough to some of the mountain's defensive soul tools. Fantastic ability. The Giant Hammer Doluo gave Hui Yu Hao a thumbs up as he swung the large hammer in his hands once more. The other titled Doluo swiftly dispersed over the mountain, and those titled Doluo who were adept with spatial power unleashed their abilities to their fullest extent. Hui Yu Hao had to gather his strength for a moment after that hit he had taken. Afterwards, he witnessed an elderly man who was in his 60s erupt with purple light as his 8th soul ring, a black one, glowed at the same time. This elderly man closed his hands in front of his chest before he pushed them out gradually as a purple whirlpool that was about 10 centimeters in diameter flew out. This titled Doluo was known as the Shattered Star Doluo. He was one of the 2 transcendent Dolor amongst all the other titled Dolor, and he was at rank 95. His martial soul was very unique, the light of shattered stars. A single purple beam appeared on his body when his martial soul was awoken when he was 6 years old. This beam shattered everything it touched, and the light of shattered stars was a name that he had chosen for himself. His martial soul was unique, and was innately full of soul power. He was only 66 years of age today, but he had already become a transcendent Dolor. He was one of the Star Luo Empire's most powerful titled Dolor. His light of shattered stars was equipped with spatial powers, more accurately put, his martial soul was equipped with destructive spatial powers, and was very fearsome. Shattered Star Whirlpool, the tiny purple whirlpool flew out, and paused momentarily in midair before the air surrounding it billowed like a hurricane. Intense purple light seemed to swallow even the space around it, and this whirlpool expanded continuously as cracks appeared in the space around it as they merged continuously. All the incoming soul rays and cannon shells seemed to be pulled by some unseen force, and flew into the purple whirlpool before they were diced into a million pieces. Those cannon shells couldn't even detonate as the purple whirlpool seemed like it was absorbing the energies from those soul rays and cannon shells as it continued to expand. Those titled Dolor's movements became much more casual with the shattered star whirlpool protecting them as they quickly dispersed. With the help of Huiyuhao's spiritual detection, they avoided the threat from the death god as they scattered in all directions. Boom! A series of vigorous explosions rang out near the mountaintop. An enormous offensive soul tool that had been constructed on the mountain was shaken, and slanted to one side, and it was clear that it could no longer be used. That was probably caused by the giant hammer Dolor. That wasn't all, the giant hammer Dolor was guided by Huiyuhao's spiritual detection as he swung his hammer once more, and explosions boomed again and again.